The sun of the alien world rose slowly above the wide crystal plains, glowing with soft blue light that scattered across the queen's great palace. Every morning the city woke early. Workers, soldiers, scholars, and traders all moved through the shining streets, preparing for another long day under their fierce queen's rule. The queen was known across many star systems for her strong leadership. Her people respected her, feared her, and trusted that she would always protect them. She carried great power, and few dared to upset her peace. Inside the palace, however, the queen faced one challenge greater than all others. She had two young daughters who were full of curiosity and spirit. They were bright, brave, and always asking questions. The palace guards often found themselves exhausted trying to keep up with the young princesses, who loved to explore every room and every corner. The queen loved her daughters dearly, but she also worried about their safety. Her world had old enemies, and she wanted no harm to come near her children. In the same city, far from the palace walls, lived a human engineer named Evan. He had arrived months earlier as part of a peaceful agreement between humans and the alien queen's people. Evan was quiet, patient, and respectful. He always tried to understand their customs and avoid any action that could be taken as disrespect. Most of the aliens were curious about him, some kept their distance, and a few looked at him with suspicion. Evan accepted this calmly. He had come to work, not to cause problems. His job was to repair communication towers that the Queen's people could not fix alone due to different technology. He loved machines, tools, and solving complicated problems, and he worked long hours each day. On this morning, Evan was returning from a long night shift. He felt tired and sore after climbing the tall outer towers. His boots were dusty, his uniform was wrinkled, and his eyes could barely stay open. When he reached his small assigned guest house, he only wanted one thing. He wanted sleep. He removed his tool belt, placed it near the door, and lay down on the simple bed inside. His body relaxed instantly, and he felt the warm blanket under him. He closed his eyes and let out a long breath, thinking he would sleep through the entire morning. While Evan rested, the palace woke to sudden trouble. The two young princesses had vanished from their private chambers. Their beds were empty, the doors were locked from inside, and the guards outside had not seen anyone enter or leave. For a moment, the palace froze. Then the queen called an emergency alarm. Her voice echoed through every hall. Her daughters were missing. The palace guards rushed in every direction. Search teams spread across the towers, the training grounds, the garden paths, and the hidden storage rooms. They checked every vent, every passage, and every balcony. The queen herself walked with burning energy, her steps sharp and full of fear for her children's safety. The queen questioned her advisors, but no one had answers. She looked at the guards who were assigned to the princesses' chambers. They were shaking, terrified that they had failed. She did not punish them yet, but her expression showed how serious the situation had become. She ordered the palace scouts to widen the search. They were to look through the entire city if needed. No place was too small or too distant. She would not rest until her daughters were found. Outside the palace, soldiers began checking public areas. They searched markets, storage centers, and transport stations. They questioned travelers and workers. Some wondered if an enemy had kidnapped the princesses. Others suggested the children had escaped the palace on their own, as they often tried new adventures. But no one could understand how they had left such a heavily guarded place without being noticed. Evan slept deeply through the growing noise of the city. He dreamed of quiet places, floating lights, and long, peaceful nights. His breathing was slow and steady. He did not hear the distant alarms. He did not hear the guards running through the streets or the queen's voice commanding her people. He was exhausted from his work and unaware of the chaos rising around him. After some hours of rest, Evan shifted lightly on his bed. Something felt warm on his chest. He felt a small weight pressing gently against him. He slowly opened his eyes, expecting perhaps his blanket had moved, or he had dropped something during sleep. Instead, he found himself staring at two small alien faces. The queen's daughters were curled up on his chest, sleeping peacefully with their eyes closed and their delicate glowing patterns shining softly across their skin. Their bodies were small, warm, and calm. They looked safe, comfortable, and fully relaxed. Evan froze in shock. His heart almost stopped. He did not breathe for a moment. His mind raced through every possible explanation, but none made sense. How did the queen's daughters enter his house without him hearing? Why were they resting on him? What would the queen do if she discovered this? He carefully lifted his head from the pillow. The two princesses moved slightly, but did not wake. One of them shifted closer to him, as if seeking more comfort. Evan stared at the ceiling and sighed softly. He knew instantly that this situation was dangerous. The queen would not take kindly to her daughters disappearing from the palace and ending up in a human's house. Every person in the city knew how protective she was. Evan gently tried to adjust his position, but the children clung tighter to him. Their glowing patterns pulsed in a calm rhythm. He did not want to disturb them, so he forced himself to stay still. Outside, the guards finally traced faint energy signatures that matched the children. The energy trail led them across the city and toward the section where human workers lived. The soldiers gathered in a group, unsure if this meant danger or safety. The queen ordered them to keep moving. She suspected an enemy might have used a trick to lure the children there. She followed them personally with her highest-ranked scouts. Her steps were sharp and full of determination. Evan heard movement outside his house. Voices grew louder. Heavy boots approached. He felt his heart pound. The princesses were still resting on him. Their tiny hands were holding onto his shirt. He whispered softly, trying to wake them without frightening them, but they only curled closer. He felt trapped, confused, and nervous. He wanted peace with the queen's people. He wanted no trouble. Yet here he was, lying with the queen's daughters sleeping on him, and he had no explanation. The door to his house was pushed open with force, and several guards stepped inside, their armor glowing with defensive energy. They looked around quickly, searching for danger. Then their eyes landed on Evan lying on the bed. Their weapons lowered slowly in shock. They could not believe what they were seeing. The princesses were lying safely on a human's chest. The queen entered behind them. She stopped as soon as she saw the scene. Her fierce presence filled the room, and even the guards took a step back. Evan felt himself freeze again. He did not dare move. The queen stared at her daughters, then at Evan, then back at the children. She expected fear, resistance, or discomfort from her daughters. Instead, she saw complete peace. The girls slept deeply, their glowing patterns bright and steady. They looked happier than they had in days. The queen did not speak for a long moment. The room was silent, except for the soft breathing of the children. Evan felt sweat on his neck. He wanted to explain, but his voice was trapped in his throat. He had never been this close to the queen. Her presence felt like standing near a storm made of fire. Yet her daughters were sleeping on him as if he were the safest place in the world. One of the princesses woke slowly and looked up. When she saw the queen, she did not run to her. Instead, she smiled sleepily and hugged Evan's chest again. The queen's eyes widened in surprise. The child showed no fear or discomfort. She showed trust. The queen finally spoke, and her voice was deep, controlled, and serious. She asked Evan how her daughters had arrived here. Evan answered honestly that he had no idea. He explained he had been sleeping and woke to find them like this. The queen studied his face. She looked at his hands, his expression, and every small detail. She sensed no threat in him. She saw no signs of harm on her daughters. In fact, the girls looked calmer with him than they did with most palace members. This confused her even more. Her daughters did not usually trust strangers. They were cautious because of the Queen's lessons and because of past threats from enemies. Yet here they were, resting on a human engineer they barely knew. The other princess woke and sat up slowly. She crawled up to Evan's shoulder and wrapped her arms around his neck gently. This action shocked every guard in the room. The Queen stared in disbelief. Her daughters rarely showed affection to palace staff, yet they treated Evan like someone familiar and safe. The Queen stepped closer, her voice softer now. She told Evan to rise slowly so the children would not get frightened. He obeyed carefully, keeping his movements gentle. The children stayed close to him, holding his arms. The Queen watched every detail, trying to understand the strange connection forming between her daughters and the human. She finally ordered Evan to accompany her back to the palace. Her voice was firm but no longer harsh. She wanted answers. She wanted to understand why her daughters had chosen this human as their resting place. Evan nodded respectfully. He did not want to resist. The children clung to him as he walked out of the house, staying at his side as if they belonged there. The Queen walked in front, and the guards surrounded them. The city watched as the unusual group passed through the streets. Whispers spread quickly. People wondered why the royal children held the humans' hands. Some were confused. Some were curious. Some were amazed. No one had ever seen the royal daughters attach themselves to an outsider like this, and never before had a human walked beside the Queen with such importance. Evan felt nervous with all eyes on him, but he stayed calm for the children's sake. He did not want to make them uncomfortable. They walked proudly, almost happily, guiding him toward the palace gates. When they entered the palace, the Queen looked back once more at Evan. She saw the way her daughters leaned into him. She saw the calmness he brought to them. She knew that something unusual had happened. Something important she needed to understand. Part 1 ends with the Queen deciding that Evan would not be punished. Instead, she would observe the human closely. She needed to discover why her daughters trusted him more than any guard in the palace. If you want, I will now write Part 2 with the same style, length, and quality. Evan walked through the tall palace gates with careful steps. The Queen's daughters held onto his arms, their small hands resting lightly against his sleeves. They walked as if he were part of their family, not a visitor from a distant world. The guards did not know where to look. Some stared at the princesses, some glanced nervously at the Queen, and some watched Evan with a strange mix of shock and curiosity. Evan kept his head slightly lowered out of respect, but he remained calm. The children were relaxed beside him, and he did not want them to sense any worry. The Queen led the group through the shining halls of the palace. The floors were made of smooth crystal, and the walls glowed with soft patterns of shifting light. The Queen's steps were strong and silent, and she looked forward without speaking. Her mind was full of questions. She had ruled her people for many years, and she had learned to read situations quickly, but nothing in her long experience helped her understand what she saw today. Her daughters did not trust easily. They were careful and shy around strangers. Yet the two girls were now attached to a human, leaning against him with natural comfort. The palace workers stepped aside as the Queen passed. Their eyes followed the strange scene in silence. Some whispered to each other after the Queen walked past. They asked why the princesses looked so calm with the human. Others wondered if Evan had a special gift. A few even speculated that the children had chosen him for a reason yet unknown. Evan heard the whispers, but tried not to react. His concern was staying respectful and keeping the children peaceful. The Queen led them into a quiet room inside the inner palace. The doors closed behind them, and only a few trusted guards remained outside. The room was warm and filled with soft cushions. The queen turned and watched her daughters sit beside Evan on a wide cushion. One girl held his hand. The other leaned her head on his arm. Evan did not move too much. He simply let them settle, unsure what else to do. The queen stood across from them, studying the human with sharp, thoughtful eyes. She was not angry anymore. Instead, she was focused. She needed answers, but she did not want to frighten the children. She asked Evan to explain everything again. Evan repeated calmly that he had been asleep and woke to find the children resting on him. He added that he did not want to disturb them because they seemed peaceful. His tone was polite and sincere. The queen listened carefully. She looked at her daughters again. Their glowing patterns showed calmness and trust. Then she looked at Evan. His energy was different from her people's. It was softer, steady, and gentle. She was beginning to understand that her daughters had sensed something in him that made them feel safe. She approached her daughters slowly and asked them why they had gone to the human's home. The children looked up at her with wide eyes. One of them said they wanted to explore and ended up near the human worker section. They saw Evan's house and felt a strange pull toward it. They did not feel afraid. They felt comfort. They said they felt a warm feeling when they saw him sleeping. They crawled inside quietly and ended up resting on him because he felt safe and calm. The queen looked at Evan again. She asked him if he had any special ability. Evan shook his head. He explained he was just an engineer and had no unusual powers. He thought maybe the children simply trusted him because he always tried to be gentle and respectful around everyone. The queen thought deeply. She knew her daughters could sense energy more sharply than most adults. She wondered if the human carried a natural energy that matched their sensitive instincts. Instead of giving orders or rushing to conclusions, the queen decided to watch carefully. She told Evan he would stay inside the palace for a while. She wanted to observe how the children behaved around him. Evan agreed. He did not want to cause trouble, and he understood the seriousness of the situation. The queen sent a message to the palace staff, instructing them to prepare a guest room next to the children's study area. The room was not luxurious but comfortable, with soft lighting and simple furniture. Evan thanked the queen respectfully for the arrangement. When Evan stood up to move toward his new room, the princesses immediately stood up with him. They grabbed his hands again. The queen watched with a mixture of surprise and confusion. She asked the children to stay for a moment so she could speak with Evan. The girls hesitated but eventually walked to their mother. They stayed close to her side, but their eyes kept drifting back to Evan as if they wanted to follow him. The queen spoke to Evan in a lower tone. She told him she understood he meant no harm and that she would not hold him responsible for the children's actions. She said she needed time to understand the bond forming between them. Evan nodded and promised to follow every palace rule and behave with respect. The queen appreciated his calm nature. She had dealt with many humans before, but most were too loud or too eager to impress. Evan was different. His quiet manner did not demand attention. It simply created peace. The queen allowed Evan to go to his new room. The children watched him leave with sad eyes, but the queen reassured them they would see him again soon. When Evan entered the room, he sat on the simple bed and took a deep breath. He felt overwhelmed. He had only come here to fix communication towers. Now he was involved in the queen's family matters. He did not know if this was good or bad, but he planned to stay respectful, careful, and honest. Inside the main hall, the queen sent away the remaining guards and sat alone with her daughters. She asked them to describe everything they felt when they saw Evan. The children explained that his energy felt warm and steady. It reminded them of safe spaces, quiet nights, and gentle lights. They said they could breathe easily near him. They did not sense any danger. One of them even said she felt braver with him around. The queen listened closely. She realized this was no simple coincidence. Her daughters had a rare sensitivity, and if both of them felt the same way, then there must be something special about the human. Later that afternoon, the Queen invited Evan to join them in the royal garden. The children ran to him at once and held his hands. Evan felt nervous but tried to stay calm. The garden was beautiful, filled with glowing flowers and tall trees that shined under the soft sky. The Queen watched from a short distance as Evan walked with her daughters. The children showed him their favorite spots. They told him stories about the garden animals. They played near him but never too far away. Every time they laughed, Evan felt the tension leave his body. The Queen observed everything. She noticed how the children reacted when Evan used his gentle voice. She saw how they calmed instantly when he spoke to them. She saw how they followed him naturally, like he had been part of their lives for a long time. She approached slowly and asked Evan to sit with them. He did so respectfully. The children placed themselves on either side of him. The Queen asked questions. She asked if the children felt safe. They nodded. She asked if Evan had ever scared them before. They shook their heads. She asked if they would want him to stay nearby. They both answered yes without hesitation. The Queen's thoughts grew deeper. She had always believed strength came from power and force, but now she was seeing a new kind of strength. She saw how calmness could protect more than armor. She saw how kindness could build trust faster than commands. She saw how a human, with no special abilities or royal blood, could make her daughters feel safe in a way no guard ever could. Throughout the evening, the Queen continued observing them. She watched Evan help the children climb a low crystal branch. He stood nearby to catch them if they slipped, though they did not fall. She watched him share stories about Earth, explaining simple things like rain and forests. The children listened with bright eyes. They were fascinated. They asked endless questions. Evan answered each one patiently. The Queen saw how effortlessly he connected with them. When the sun began to set, the Queen called them back inside. The children held Evan's hands again, not wanting to leave. The Queen allowed him to walk with them to the palace dining room. She invited him to sit at a separate table nearby. She observed how the children kept glancing at him to make sure he was still close. When he finished eating, the children finished quickly too. They walked to him again and tugged gently at his sleeves, wanting more time. The Queen finally saw the truth clearly. This human was no threat. He was a gift. He was someone her daughters needed. His presence brought them balance and calmness in a world full of duties and expectations. The Queen realized she had found something rare, someone who did not seek power but still held a kind of strength that protected without effort. After dinner, the Queen called Evan into the inner hall. The children were taken to their sleeping chamber, though they resisted until the Queen promised they would see Evan in the morning. Evan stood before the Queen respectfully. She looked at him for a long moment, then spoke with firm sincerity. She told him she had seen enough to understand. The Queen said the bond between him and her daughters was strong and natural. She explained that her people believed in fate and signs. She saw this situation as a sign that Evan had a role in her daughters' lives. She announced that from this day forward, Evan would be the royal protector of the princesses. It was a sacred role, given only to those the royal children trusted deeply. No human had ever been chosen for such a position in their history. Evan was speechless. He tried to refuse out of humility. He said he was only an engineer. He said he did not think he deserved such an honor. But the Queen raised her hand gently and told him this was not about worthiness. It was about what her daughters felt. Their instincts were pure and never wrong. She trusted their decision. Evan accepted the role with quiet respect. He promised to protect the children with all his heart. The Queen nodded with approval. She stepped forward and placed her hand lightly on his shoulder, welcoming him into the palace as someone truly trusted. That night, the princesses slept peacefully. Their glowing patterns were bright and steady. They held on to each other but kept asking the guards when Evan would return. The guards smiled and told them he would visit in the morning. The children relaxed and drifted into sleep, dreaming of the quiet human who made them feel safe. Evan returned to his room, still trying to understand how his life had changed so quickly. He had come to fix machines, yet he had found a new purpose he had never imagined. He lay down on his bed and looked up at the soft crystal ceiling. For the first time since arriving on the alien world, he felt he truly belonged. The Queen stood alone on her balcony, watching the stars. She thought about the events of the day. For many years she had believed strength meant controlling everything around her. But today she learned that strength also meant trusting others. She smiled softly, knowing her daughters had chosen well. The story ends with the Queen looking toward the guest room where Evan rested, aware that this calm and gentle human had changed her daughters' lives and would remain in their future as someone important and trusted. Evan slept peacefully, unaware that he had become a part of the royal family's destiny.